So good afternoon and assalamu alaikum to everyone joining us today, including our panelists and our listeners online. I'm joined by my co-host Zubair in this series of In Conversations With, which is a follow-up to some of the earlier conversations me and Zubair have been having on what's likely to be an incredible game-changing journey in the startup and entrepreneur space.
Thanks, Firoz. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Firoz. Walaikum salam.
Okay, so this series has been dubbed Reflections and is the world's first online, offline entrepreneurship hub where panelists will share their insights and expertise. And answer all those questions that every startup founder is itching to ask on the real value of these relationships and the thematic discussions often missed on the startup circuit. So we'll be talking about impact, the SDGs, and of course, access to funding, women's economic empowerment, inclusion, wider diversity, and of course, sustainability. Following all of this, all these conversations will culminate in a plenary of intellect, expertise, and talent between the 5th and 7th of December at the Halal Expo and the Halal Economy Conference. And for all of you, this is our second webinar in a series, and today's all about tech. So, okay, let's get started. We already have a list of questions, but our listeners can use the Q&A tabs to ask questions, which will come through to myself and Zubair as soon as he can get back online, and we'll put them to our panel. If we can ask you to keep your questions to the point and to which panelist the question is addressed. So today we have champions who've navigated this journey themselves. All their bio is in the LinkedIn in hyperlinks we've shared. Today we're talking about all things technology. So we'll be throwing need to know questions on everything tech related, from blockchain to cryptocurrencies to our panel of business experts. We'll learn from them which technological innovations startups need to be on the ball with and what can be left aside, whether it's in the tech space or not. And also we'll be asking our panelists, what is the relevance of blockchain for startups? Should consumers and supply chains be interested in this technology? And what is cryptocurrency, and is it important to the whole sector? So our conversations will focus on how they see their companies and startups in developing technological solutions to tackle the halal trust deficit, enabling safety, transparency, and traceability for halal products, as well as how this technology is enabling the growth of communities of the future. So, do we have Zubair back? No, I think we're still waiting for him to come back online. All right. Let's all get into this. Welcome to all of our panelists. We have Saleem Qureshi, lead investor of Lincoln Method. We have Sharif, founder and CEO of FarmaTrust. We have
Hello, Firoz. Thank you.
Walaikum salam. We have Fateh Ali, co-founder and CEO of CollabDeen.
Thank you. My pleasure joining here.
And we have Sabrain, founder of OneAgrix.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me here.
Okay, so we both want to personally welcome you to our In Conversation series, and of course, for being part of the bigger picture as we reshape the halal economy narrative. So sit back, let's get into this, and let's cast your mind back to when you started the journey. So the first question, and this is to any one of you, and it's been a popular one, so please a short answer. For startups and policymakers trying to make sense of blockchain, what is it really, and does it make any difference?
Shall I take that first?
That would be fantastic. Thank you for piping up.
So what blockchain technology is, in very simple terms, is a method to create permanent digital records as products or transactions pass from one entity to another. So in our particular example, we track pharmaceutical products from the point of from the point of manufacture to the point of consumption, and every data point in between. The reason you would use blockchain technology for that is that once records are actually created, you cannot then change them. So it's that whole concept of immutability and incorruptibility. The second reason is if blockchain technology breaks down data silos. So you can take data from very different systems and have it in one particular kind of distributed ledger platform, or in our case, you can have it on multiple different blockchain platforms. I hope that kind of simplifies explaining what it is rather than how it's done. But in terms of why it's important is because it can or has the promise of fundamentally changing society and way commercial transactions are done by removing an authorized or trusted central body. So you have trust in a kind of a trustless environment, and that's the key to the whole system from the perspective we look at it. And it is being adopted. So what you'll find is Deloitte's recently did a survey, actually I think it was out last month, where they said 83% of the senior executives that they interviewed see that there are use cases in the real world that can be addressed by blockchain technology. And 53% have made it a top 5 priority in their company. So you really need to understand, blockchain technology and where it's going to take the global market. For me, I do an analogy in terms of the internet. So being the age I am, I lived through the dot-com boom and bust. And we're at around, in my estimation, 1998, 99, perhaps a little bit later. And I remember in those days, my banking friends and lawyers involved in real estate said you would never use the internet for banking. Now, of course, everyone does all their banking on an app on their mobile phone. So that's kind of, for me, stresses the importance of blockchain technology in terms of the way commerce will be conducted over the next 5 or 10 years. And I think people underestimate the speed of adoption that blockchain is having. You may not hear about it a lot other than cryptocurrencies, drug dealers, and money laundering, but the reality is actually there's some very large corporations out there that are not only doing POCs, but are actually utilizing the technology and seeing how they can improve and streamline their businesses.
Fantastic. Well, look, that's really insightful, and thanks for kicking us off with what is blockchain. Segues nicely into the next question that we've got. So this is probably for each of the panelists, but let's start off with Diana and work our way through. How are your companies and your technological solutions tackling the halal trust deficit to enable safety, transparency, and traceability for halal products?
Yes, for us at OneAgrix, what we are creating is an ecosystem. Foremost, we are a B2B e-commerce marketplace. And what we use is we use technology as an enabler to actually solve the halal trust deficit issue. So you talk about transparency. There are a few sectors that, few verticals that we have to focus here. But for us right now, with a recent proof of concept, we actually tackle the halal trust deficit at a data level, whereby, normally as a buyer and supplier, you would have to inquire first, and you have to actually sometimes second guess as to whether since we're dealing with agri-food, we do not want to be second guessing whether it's a legit supplier. So for us, being a B2B e-commerce marketplace using blockchain technology as a technology enabling it to actually give supplier the opportunity, a buyer the opportunity to actually check whether the suppliers are really halal certified or not. So that's one way that we're solving the issue. Secondly, using marry blockchain and IoT technology together to actually trace agri-food ingredients from farm to fork or shelf. Or seed to shelf. So people always say that use blockchain technology and is it the only technology that would actually be the only technology that solves issue in trust, transparency, and halal trust deficit? My humble opinion, the answer is no. Technology really grow really quickly. So what we want to do is we want to actually keep ourselves open and always be ready to digitally transform ourselves to adopt whatever technology that comes within 5, 10, 20 years to go. For now, yes, blockchain technology has that power. It has that power to actually solve the transparency issue, the trust deficit issue. However, we have to be careful to not use it as a crutch. You know, it cannot be only that. We have to always be open-minded to it. I know the popular view now is everything blockchain technology. However, we have to look at the big and see that, you know, blockchain you have to couple with IoT, couple with AI and machine learning to actually make it more transparent and in the ecosystem, in the supply chain. So that's what OneAgrix is doing right now. Still in phases. Phase 1 now is to get data sets and halal certification bodies on board in our ecosystem, the abattoirs, everyone in the supply chain, even in the logistics from end-to-end supply chain, to be on board to actually create that trust and transparency in the ecosystem.
Fantastic. Thank you, Diana. That's really insightful and really interesting to learn about what's possible within this space and what you're using blockchain for. Same question, I suppose, as I'm really interested in what Raja's got to say about the pharmaceutical industry and how blockchain is also being used in terms of you know, enabling safety and traceability for medical products. So Raja, what's your experience and what can you share with us how your company is using technological solutions to build or build a bridge between the halal trust deficit, if you like?
Well, we don't directly use it for halal products per se. We use it for regulated products. So we're the only blockchain company that's actually authorized under the European Union FMD regulations. We're also taking part in the US FDA blockchain pilots. In fact, I think we're the only European company that is taking part in those pilots. Now, in terms of the halal economy, actually, it's not that different to regulated medicinal supply. Why you would use our technology in the pharmaceutical or any regulated industry is because the complexity of the supply chain means there's a number of different operators in there. There's no one single participant. So not only, for example, if you were doing food, as Diana has clearly pointed out, it's not just the farmer, it's the logistics provider, and then it's the warehouse management, and then, you know, the shipping, the port authority, the customs. They need a system which they can access one by one, rather than each of them individually having their own systems which try and sync with them. Now, what our technology, and we've actually installed it in one of the largest pharmaceutical companies here in Europe, what we find is not only does it give you complete transparency in terms of who had what, i.e. the chain of custody, but we can also do chain of identity, and we can also do chain of condition, i.e. has the particular medicine been stored within certain environmental conditions, be it humidity, light, or heat, which of course is still important for foodstuffs because they do have a habit of going off. Now, as well as the provenance, which Diana is talking about in terms of, you know, being able to know who had it, when they had it, and what they did with it, in the pharmaceutical sector, it's actually even more important to be able to do things like recalls. So if a certain medicine of a particular batch is leading to significant side effects, or the ingredients weren't properly mixed up, you need to recall those. Now, in the experiments we've done, traditionally that could take a couple of months, like 60 days, again, because of the spread of the medicines around. We can locate them within 5 seconds, right? Literally 5 seconds, because we know who had it, where it is, and where the endpoint is. So from a consumer safety perspective, it's actually a very good system to be able to find out where a particular product is at a particular given moment. The only thing I would say in terms of halal foods and pharmaceuticals is that, of course, certain coatings and certain tablets are made from animal products in one way or another. And I know I'm not an expert in Sharia law. Of course, there are certain exceptions in the case of necessity where you can have non-halal products. But I think most Muslims would want to know that any kind of pharmaceutical product they're taking does comply with halal regulations. And it shouldn't really be a problem anymore because, you know, the prevalence of halal foods, be it meats or other organic matter, is quite easily found. It's just a matter of showing the pharmaceutical industry that there's a demand for it. And I haven't seen any campaigns in the halal sector to say, hey, I want to take a medicine, but can you make sure it's made of a halal gelatine or a vegan gelatine or a vegetarian gelatine product rather than, you know, in many cases, cows or in these cases, pig products are actually, or pork products are put into medicines.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, Roger, that's been fascinating, and Diana, thank you both for sharing a little bit about what your companies are actually doing with the technology platforms. Want to welcome Zubair back. I think there must have been a power cut or something in Pakistan. Who knows?
Yeah, something like that. But that's how we have to roll, right? So, as my 15-year-old would say. So
welcome back, Zubair. I'm just going to throw one more question, and then I'm going to give you some space to speak to our panelists. But I want to bring Fateh Ali into this conversation. So, Fateh Ali, tell us a little bit about CollabDeen and how technology is enabling the growth of Muslim communities of the future.
Right. So CollabDeen is a deep tech AI-powered platform offering faith-based communities and brands the tools to engage and make an impact in this growing halal ecosystem. Primarily, it's a SaaS platform and app that supports a workplace and a private social network model of collaboration within the Islamic communities. So allowing administrators and organizations to create, promote, and manage their communities and significantly improve the members' experience within those communities. So put it in an effective, automated, and sustainable way. So primarily what we're doing is, as we all know, there are about 3.58 million masjids around the world, mosques, and about 7+ million community centers around. So primarily our technology would be used between these communities and Islamic centers, primarily on the faith side. And on the business side, there's no collaboration tool where businesses and brands, influencers trying to reach out to this Muslim audience. There's no one unique platform where people can play part of the ecosystem. So that's where we are trying to bridge in this technological gap. And we have seen a lot of technological problems faced by everyone day in, day out, and we are solving them one by one.
Fantastic, thank you. Zubair.
Yeah, so I'm just reading through some of the questions that are coming through online as well. So I think this next one, Saleem, I'd like you to share your thoughts. So ethical companies have blossomed across the world in recent years, from fair trade, food and clothing to issue-driven social projects. Do you think it is no coincidence that halal businesses have bloomed simultaneously? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting question, and I can speak only to the domains that I practice in. And we've recently taken a lead equity stake in a edtech startup called Lincoln Method. And Lincoln Method is driving social change and social entrepreneurship with respect to understanding or teaching kids as young as nursery about cryptocurrencies, blockchain, so on and so forth. I mean, we have young girls in Pakistan who are 7 years old who are talking about blockchain they speak in greater fluency than a lot of the adults do. I believe that blockchain is something which can really, really transform how people do business, and it's basically it's the next domain that everyone needs to kind of get into, just like Raja said. And one of the projects that we've started that we're backing, it's a project started off by Lincoln Method. It's called the Slum Block Millionaire. And what the slum block millionaire does is that it goes to deprived communities or disadvantaged communities, and it takes kids from those communities and it teaches them blockchain. We're doing this with communities within Pakistan. We're doing this with communities within Nigeria. We've received a lot of support from the likes of Brock Pierce, who is the chairman of the Bitcoin Bitcoin Foundation. We've received a lot of support from the EOS community as well as from the Ethereum community. And I believe that the best way to drive social change is to start addressing how the fabric of society starts adopting social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And one of the best ways that we are able to do this is to start educating the people who won't necessarily have the ability to learn about blockchain. And the starting point for us is these rural communities, these slums, and what better place to start than in Pakistan?
So I'm just going to go back to the question, which was, do you think it's a coincidence? I'm sensing that it's not, but given where technology is now and how important a role technology is playing, do you feel that this is the right time where ethical and halal are kind of merged into this gray space and technology has enabled that? Or do you think it really is just a coincidence that now you're talking about social impact and impact investing and social entrepreneurship?
I think it's a very natural fit because halal is ethical and ethical is halal. So I think when both come together, then magic happens.
Yeah, so it's not such a coincidence. It's by design, I guess.
What do you
it's
think?
A natural fit. It's a hand in glove kind of a fit if you want to look at it from that standpoint.
Yeah, exactly.
I just saw Diana nodding. So what do you think, Diana? You got something to add?
Yes, I've got something to add. I've always believed that, we in the halal economy, we're in a unique position. The Western world has been talking about the UN SDG goals, and it's my personal opinion that as a halal or Islamic startup, is really inbuilt in the soul of all our startups, because like what Saleem said, that ethical is halal, halal is ethical. Is very Islamic. So you do not need to be a non-profit organization to actually be SDG compliant or to actually support the SDGs. I think by default, there's so many SDGs out there, and every Islamic or halal economy startup can actually adopt a few in our startups by default. This is the heart and soul of the halal economy, and I believe there is no coincidence. And the millennials and Gen Z, we are ready to actually build startups with that in mind as a backbone.
Okay, so that takes me nicely, actually segues into the next question I've actually got. So Zubair, just bear with me for a second. There's a burning question coming up.
Yeah.
And this is a personal question to all of you, actually. As founders of tech-based companies, do you believe there's a shortage of halal-focused tech startups? Is there a dearth of incubator or accelerator programs dedicated to this niche? What's your experience been like being an entrepreneur in this space? So this is for all of you, please. I'm fascinated to hear what you've got to say and share with our audience as well.
Right, I can jump on this. Being in the space for a while now, what if I told you that there are many initiatives around the world which actually supports Islamic-focused startups? There have been many attempts in the past. Say, for example, last month I was in the States where there was an event by AMCC, right, American Muslim Consumer Consortium. They started up in 2007, is what I believe. And since then, they've been showcasing entrepreneurships at various levels, say LaunchGood, Musmatch being there, Pitched In. So I think what has happened here in all this time and age is, it's what came first, chicken or the egg? The investors and the whole ecosystem is still not ready because there are no startups who have already made an impact. If somebody asks from an outside the global Islamic economy, saying, do you have any unicorns in your global Islamic economy? There are none. So what needs to happen now is, the trust has to be built up in this, the whole ecosystem where, startups taking up challenge, stepping up, and then trying to prove, we need one or two prime examples for a lot of hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs to go and, catch up that entrepreneurship journey and, evolve this ecosystem. And on the flip side, the investors are still not out actively engaging, as what I've experienced. There are people within the Muslim world is not very much interested in going out for a Muslim startup versus when you compare a commercial startup from the Western world, right? So that's kind of balance. There are many people who are trying to establish this ecosystem. In Australia, if you take a look, there's Startup Ummah, Good Force Lab recently by Rafiuddin, the NAS standards have been established. Then within that ecosystem, there's Falco networks of investors network that's coming up. Riyadh, Bahrain has a different startup ecosystem. Taqwa Tech in Malaysia recently launched by Gobi Partners. Things are getting evolved, even not just from within the global Islamic economy point of view. We have started seeing a lot of people from, say, Chinese investors, Japanese investors coming and trying to put their hands on into this economy. And there are huge potential to see the fastest growing economy, being one of the youngest population on the median age. There is actually no shortage of Islamic startups, I would say. This ecosystem needs a unicorn and a success story to get evolution started.
Well, that's
Firoz, I'd just like to add something over there. And you said it's a burning question for you. So I want to put water on the fire. I think that there are very few businesses or startups that are non-halal, whether they're started up by Muslim founders or not. I mean, 90%, we're investors, right? And I think that 95% of the businesses that, or business plans that come to us, whether they are from a Muslim founder or a non-Muslim founder, they follow the basic principles of, of what trade is all about. I mean, you don't, there are just so many businesses that are out there. You don't need to, look at the businesses that deal in alcohol and firearms and gambling and so on and so forth. I think that the majority of the businesses are halal, whether they are from a Muslim founder or a non-Muslim founder.
Thank you, Saleem. So basically what I'm saying is, let's not pigeonhole new startups and businesses into the halal pigeon box, if you like, or putting things into just saying it's a halal business or halal focus. As investors, you are open to any business which is ethical and sustainable.
I think if I might add something, Firoz, I've got a little experience in terms of how the Islamic finance world works in the startup area. But what I would say is, the most Islamic financing I've ever seen is in Silicon Valley. And the reason I saw that was I spoke to a lot of VCs there, right? And obviously the models that they use are not based on riba or interest payments. It's based more on a risk reward, depending on how much equity you can give away, etc. But they are willing to take a risk, right? They are willing to take controlled risks on very small startups, which may have an opportunity to grow. And I don't see that actually in not the halal economy, but coming back to Fateh Ali's point, I don't see that coming from the finance houses, particularly the big ones out of the Middle East. I'm not so familiar with the Asian ones. They tend to just come in at the end, at the scale-up stage. So they'll invest in an Uber or a Facebook or a Snapchat towards the IPO round to get their very fast buck and pull it out. Now, as far as my understanding of Sharia law goes when it comes to investment, and as I said, I'm no expert in this, is you cannot predict who God is going to reward. So you have to try and risk it. You have to try and work hard at it. And you have to really have some kind of controlled risk mechanisms so that, the 80% of losses that you make are covered by the 20% of the unicorns or high payers that Fatih is talking on. But we don't have that in the Islamic world, as far as I can see so far. And it's really quite unfortunate. I mean, I agree with Saleem, it's not about halal meat or halal makeup or et cetera, et cetera. There's a diversity of different halal products or businesses you can employ in. But what I find a little bit disappointing is that they don't actually help grow those kind of businesses. Careem's a good example of where it seemed to have worked at a small, but that was brought up by Uber, and frankly, it was an Uber copy. It wasn't an original idea. And what I would like to see coming out of these Sharia or finance is to go back to the original principles of not trying to get a guaranteed return. Of course, risk needs to be controlled, but it's to prospect, and that's the only way you're going to go back to the old golden age of experimentation, prospecting, and working hard to ensure that returns are good and the economy generally is improved. And I say that with a tinge of kind of disappointment, but because of my own experiences, but also as perhaps a statement or a plea to these people to say, okay, look, stop concentrating somewhere else when you can have your homegrown talent and homegrown companies as well.
So that leads nicely into a question that I have been wanting to ask. And I'm going to ask you, Raja, first, because I think it links into what you said, and then maybe Diana can add in. Do you think then there needs to be a series of new strategies to meet the challenges and complexities of what you're talking about in terms of the halal economy? How to put it? Perhaps then policymakers should be taking note of what you're saying. There needs to be a different approach or a different mechanism or a different way of looking at this. Do you think then there needs to be a broader strategic overhaul, perhaps?
I think there's two things, okay? One is, I mean, it's great to have diversity between the people in the Ummah. And the constant disagreement and bickering, if I certify a product halal for Malaysia, am I going to have it halal in the UAE? I don't know. We know there's little mud fights going on occasionally between the, but one, as a consumer, I want to know what halal is, and it's not a difficult kind of concept. It's very simple, and certainly from an Islamic perspective, it was made to be quite straightforward. The second thing, Zubair, I would say is, I don't think it's so much of a re-strategy, but going back to your basic principles of what Sharia demands of you. And it doesn't mean, as Saleem says, you must invest in a Muslim or a Muslim economy, although some people may disagree that there are certain hadith or rulings that say you should invest or associate with certain ways. But I think it means go back to the original principles, which are, look, we are here to discover, right? We are here to prospect. We should invest in technologies and people that are going to fundamentally change society for us, be it technological, biological, pharmaceutical, or otherwise. And, I think people have lost touch with that for various reasons, but primarily this greed, which comes from, okay, I've got wealth, I need to keep it. Whereas I think if we, look at our friends across the Atlantic, it's more about, okay, I've got money, but I want to make far more. I don't want my, 4% return or 8% return, and call it profit rather than interest. There's fundamental issues in terms of, I think, how people are masking interest payments by calling them profit, or being risk averse by trying to say, oh, this is unreasonable risk. My company would not have got off the ground if I went to, I don't know, one of these Sharia type institutions and said, would you invest in me? I know that. And I think most of you nodding your heads I also agree with that, because they would just say, no, I want to invest in Uber in the last stages just before an IPO. And that's just the reality of it. And in fact, the investors
Can I just add to what Raja has just said? Because he's made a very, very valid point. And again, I will speak to this whole topic from the standpoint of an investor. If we take the halal economy, what's most important is the economy. And what the most important thing about the economy is the transaction. And you just need to make sure that the transaction is a halal transaction. It's as simple as that, right? Now, the biggest issue is that people get so bogged down with the concepts of halal that they forget about the transaction, right? And they don't focus on the transaction. And it's all talk. But when it comes down to the balance sheet, which is the most important thing, because that's what's going to help you hire more people, build your companies, scale, grow, so on and so forth. They have no concept of what the transaction is all about. Right? So they focus so much on the halal aspect, they forget about the economy aspect.
Yeah, so I would like to add what Raja and Saleem said. First, to Saleem's point about focusing on the economics of it. As an investor, they would want to see the opportunity in halal potentially being the next China economy. When Jack Ma opened the floodgates of halal e-commerce out to the world, is a matter of economics. That's why you see investors, irregardless of creed, they would invest because based on economics. So when we met so far 4 prominent VCs for OneAgrix, when we were pitching, and surprisingly they are all non-Muslims, and they say that they understand the economics of it. They knew that pitches that we are actually trying to build something which is akin to the next halal China economy. So I understand Saleem's point of view. You need to communicate at the balance sheet as well. Don't forget the transactions. And see it more as an economic standpoint rather than just halal. Of course, you do not take away the integrity of halal. That's important. But at the same time, as founders, we need to communicate how, because investors, they care about dollars and cents apart from other things that they care about. So we need to communicate that as well, the returns, the potential of it, the economics of it. And to the point of Raja, when you mentioned about, as a consumer, you want to know whether it's halal. There are different halal standards. Different halal standards, different halal certification bodies in the world. They've been talking about harmonization for a very long time right now. But I've got good mentors and they're in the food sector. And I think Sister Salama Evans, she's also listening right now. And the feedback has always been about harmonization. But actually, we could actually work on equalization, more on an equalizer. The standards have to come together. There must be synergy. They have to come together. The different halal certification bodies in the ecosystem, they need to come together and see where is it that they can find a common ground to encourage cross-border trade. Because if you wait for harmonization to happen, it will take a very long time. Everyone, like Raja said, you talk about greed, it's about money, everyone wants to be a lead at it. Well, it's not about that. I think leadership is also, in my opinion, a form of synergy and partnerships. I mean, in a report, I can't recall right now which report, I need to check it again. It states that the future companies in the world, the future tech companies in the world will be one with corporate strategic partnerships. And I think if we align to that as well, we stand a good chance, in the halal economy to actually be like, like the Islamic Golden Age back then. I think Raja mentioned that point as well.
Yeah. I think you've answered many of the things that I think some of our participants are sort of trying to understand. And Dan, I think we'll have to invite you back to one of our other panel sessions, which is on the SDGs and impact investing. What do you think, Firoz?
Absolutely.
Diana's got a lot of insight on
it. To be on
Fantastic.
it. Thank you very much. I'm humbled. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, we've got some questions coming in. So for our participants that are listening, if you can just type in your questions and then we'll try and summarize them very succinctly so we can ask our panelists. Firoz, I know you've got some questions, but just before you do, I just want to go back to Saleem and Raja, just to ask you quickly. You've given a very kind of fantastic overview in terms of simplicity of what the halal economy and transaction-based economy is. Do you think policymakers need to be taking note of what we're talking about here? And do you think they need to go back to basics as well? Just quick, 1 point each.
So I think policymakers need to fix the books, right? Make sure that the books are balanced, right? That's one of the main things that they need to do. And now, when it comes to policy making, then it becomes questionable. Is it halal for, I don't know, Malaysia or Pakistan or Nigeria to take money from the IMF? Is that halal? I don't know, right? So the most important thing is to make sure that your books are balanced, right? And then policy kind of works by itself.
Okay, Raja, any comments?
I agree. I mean, policy or regulation is there to either safeguard or the consumer. Ultimately, that's what it's about. So, as Saleem says, we need to know whether it's halal or not to take money from the IMF. The answer is pretty straightforward, I would have thought. But I think, there is a part to play for the normal halal economy, since we're talking about. If I'm investing in my ISA, as we have in the UK, what halal options do you have? Not that many, to be honest. How many funds are there that are high-risk EIS schemes, we call it here in the UK, which allow me to invest in small startups that are high-risk but give me certain tax breaks? I don't know whether you have those in Pakistan or Malaysia, for example. But there is, I think, people will ultimately show their preference by marching on their feet to the one that they think is being reasonable. The consumer will ultimately end up having to dictate where the policymakers should be heading, because we're not seeing initiatives. And I'll give you an example. The US FDA pilots we're a part of. How many are being done in the halal economies around the world? How many pilots are being done on blockchains for pharmaceutical products in the Middle East or the largest Asian Muslim economies? None, as far as I'm aware. Otherwise, we would have applied. It's like it's really, we need to get some initiative and energy behind this, and this is missing. And the public or the younger, certainly the generation that I'm seeing, the Fateh Ali and Diana kind of generation, where we're seeing, look, there is that invigoration, but we need to remove this kind of older, my generation type of guys who are, just closer to retirement and want an easy life. That needs to go.
Right, well, listen, guys. I've got a question that's come in. Sorry, Zubair.
I was just saying, I think both of you, particularly Raja, just encapsulated that very nicely, which is that initiative needs to be taken. And I think that's a takeaway for us, as well as we look at building on the in-conversations, the roundtables, and when we culminate with the economy conference as well. So I think that for us is something to sort of carry on the conversations around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really mindful that we're running out of time soon. So if it's okay, I'm going to ask one more question that's come in. And it's back to blockchain. So a quick answer, please. But someone's asked, beyond solving issues of secure payments and logistics, what is the need to deliver safe, anti-counterfeited food and medicines? And can blockchain help to do that? I think you kind of touched upon this at the beginning of our webinar, but if you can very quickly just kind of maybe start with Diana, and then Raja, we'll just move through everyone. Quick couple of sentences about that.
Yes, so blockchain technology would encourage traceability, and in that sense, from farm to fork, as I've mentioned, and at an upstream level where you talk about ingredients, and up to the downstream level where you talk about products. So what I would say to end this would be that yes, it's important. You would want. Do you want to actually eat contaminated food or food which would you want to eat contaminated food? Definitely not. Do you want to feed your family with such food products? Definitely not. So with the recent food outbreaks and fraudulent food products that are out there stop at customs, anti-counterfeited is a triple-digit billion-dollar loss in the world annually right now. And I think blockchain technology has that potential, is a great technology to actually ensure that, food safety and food security is, being solved. So that's my short comment on that. It's really important, and we shouldn't underestimate how important we need to eat safe food. Yes.
Thank you.
So very, very quickly from me, actually FarmaTrust started as an anti-counterfeiting operation. And it was mainly because a relative of mine was affected by counterfeit drugs. So that's how we started off. What we did find, however, was that from a commercial perspective, even though it's a $200 billion industry and about 1 million people each year die because of counterfeit drugs, the commercial entities that are involved in the operation weren't so concerned about that. So yes, it's there to defeat counterfeit or substandard products, but we had to commercialize it more as AI and of course the data analytics, because we were collecting so much data as we follow these products through the supply chain that we realized where the commercial companies are most interested is actually the data analytics side of it. And then counterfeit or eliminating counterfeit products was a secondary consideration. But it was initially a primary consideration for me to establish FarmaTrust.
Thanks, Roger.
Okay.
Thanks.
Firoz, I've got 2 really quick questions that have come through. And I'm being asked by 4 people to ask Saleem this question. So I'm just going to jump in quickly. So Saleem, just really short answer. What is the relevance of cryptocurrency, in your opinion, in the halal sector? So halal ethical sector, let me just rephrase that. What is the relevance of cryptocurrencies in the halal ethical sector, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think that cryptocurrencies are in its infancy, and I think that because they're in the infancy, there is a lot of speculation that goes on. But as this industry starts maturing, I think that the frameworks will start being put into place. And once the frameworks are put in place, there'll be more regulation. Hence, the halalness of the cryptocurrencies will increase.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Diana, this is for you. I'm just going to rephrase it. There's a digital economy, there's a new technology, innovation, and as an investor and also a leader, do you feel that startups and new entrants in the halal economy or the regular economy need to embrace e-commerce thinking or face not being successful at all?
Right, that's a very good question. I think it's very relevant in this era of running a startup. First, should all startup adopt e-commerce technology? It really depends on what type of startup you are in the industry that you're in. But in general, yes, there's always an opportunity to actually adopt e-commerce in a startup. It actually gives you an added advantage over competitors who do not. There's always ways for you to actually, sell something or build something or share something in an e-commerce environment. Even knowledge base, you can share it in an e-commerce environment as well. Yeah, so that's one. Digitalization, of course. Right now, if a company do not adopt technology to actually make things more efficient in their startup, then they're missing a lot. Missing the boat. So it is better. So it's about digital transformation as well as a part of adopting technology into your company. So if, let's say right now in this season, we're talking about transforming yourself digitally, and you cannot even have basic technology functions or enablers in your startup, and then you really need to think, why are you running a startup in 2019? Because going forward, technology is growing very fast. It changes very fast, and I encourage startups to actually, adopt some form of technology that is related or relevant to their startups. Yes.
Yeah, to add on, probably there's always the saying, right? If your business is not on the internet, then your business will be out of the business. So this was something probably 10, 15 years ago, but these days it's all about innovation and automation. So if you're not really innovating and automating things, you're definitely going out of business. So you have to digitally, get things into commercialization. Say, for example, let's take an example of this ecosystem, right? You have Musmatch or LaunchGood. These kind of brands have come out. Technically they have changed things, how people used to interact, and from LaunchGood point of view, how fundraising were done, or probably from Musmatch point of view, how match were done. So basically, these people came, tried to disrupt this space. So it's more important to keep innovating, taking a risk, and keep testing, because what works today, we won't work actually tomorrow, but what actually worked yesterday may definitely will continue working on. So definitely getting things on an innovation side is definitely a positive sign for every business now.
Yeah, look at a webinar now. You see, Halal Expo is doing, a conference on webinar, not in person. You see, like the physical trade conference. So that's innovation for you, right, Fateh? Right?
Thank you for the endorsement, Diana. Firoz, I think that's all we've got time for. I just want to mention that there are 8 questions coming through online. They're all for Raja. So Raja, we might have to take you offline and then online, and maybe you can draft your responses and we can answer them. So for example, one is, what's Raja's thoughts on clinical trials for women? So I know we haven't got time to answer that at the moment, but maybe we could do that offline as well.
Sure, no worries, no problem.
Firoz, I think that's about it, really.
Okay, well, listen, so thank you to all of our panelists today, Saleem Qureshi, Raja Sharif, Fateh Ali, and Diana Sabrain, and to everyone that's tuned in onto our live webinar across Facebook Live. We've got our next one in 2 weeks' time. We'll be talking to the financial industry experts and bankers. This webinar has been recorded, so you can listen again and forward on, and please don't forget to include the hashtag Halal Expo London.
Yeah, and there's been some really valuable insights today. I know certainly Firoz and I have learned a few things, but what we've also done is brought people closer together. And that's exactly what this series is designed to become. A strong community of global and socially conscious entrepreneurs made up of seasoned investors like yourselves from across the globe, whether that be for impact or humanitarian focused investments. And of course, the effervescent personalities that make up tomorrow's startups.
So if you're an investor, startup founder, CEO with something to share, or a policymaker that wants to get a better understanding of this space, then get in touch with us through LinkedIn and let's get you in conversation with.
Great, Jazakallah. So we'll see you all in 2 weeks where we're talking to the Islamic banking and financial sector about what makes them tick. And I think we'll be posing some tough questions to them. Jazakallah, take care. See you soon.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, bye-bye.